There are moments in life when just a single glance is enough to make your whole world crumble. I never thought I'd witness such a thing right inside my own home between the man I called my husband and the cousin I trusted the most. They were tangled together right on our bed, and he looked at her with a sacred, tender gaze, one that was supposed to be meant only for me. And now I'm going to plan my revenge against those heartless traitors. Before we dive deep into this dramatic story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories, and leave a comment to let us know where you're watching from. Now let's get into it. I was Nora, 38, a woman who had built a life on the promise of love. 15 years with Daniel, 43, my architect husband, 2 children, Mia, 12, and Liam, 10, a mortgage, family vacations, and a tapestry of memories. Tonight was our anniversary, a milestone I'd carefully planned, but a bottle of Daniel's favorite Cabernet was missing from the store, so I'd returned early, expecting his smile and his arms. Instead, I heard his voice low and passionate, drifting from the deck. Elise, I fought this too long. I can't breathe when we're apart. Elise, my cousin, 35. My confidant, my summer guest, was healing her broken heart. The bag slipped into my hands, my pulse a drum, and my world tilted as his words carved a wound deeper than I'd ever known. I froze, the air heavy with betrayal, Daniel's voice once my anchor. Now a blade, Nora doesn't see me anymore. She's lost in her career, her perfection. We haven't connected in years, but you understand me. Her tone was hollow, practiced a performance for her conscience, and Elise's whisper was a feeble protest. Daniel, we can't. Think of Nora. My lips bled from biting them, the grocery bags a lifeline I clung to, and I should have stormed out, screamed, and shattered the wine glasses I'd bought for tonight. But my feet were rooted as if by remaining motionless I could unhear their truth. The waves roared a mournful chant, and I felt the first spark of something fierce, a rage, a resolve stirring beneath my grief. Their words were a poison I couldn't get away from, and the deck was only a few steps away. What about the business? Elise said. Your families are tied to it. Daniel's response was a measured mutter. It's complicated, but I've planned for it. There are ways. My breath caught. The business, my family's investment, had planted Daniel's architectural firm, a legacy we'd built together, was scheming beyond the affair, unraveling our shared empire. A glass slipped from my numb fingers, shattering on the hardwood, a sharp echo of my heart. Their voices stopped the silence, louder than their betrayal. I couldn't run. Couldn't hide the broken shards, so I took a different route. I straightened my shoulders, feeling as strong as steel, and walked to the deck where the glass crunched beneath my shoes. I'm back early. I called my voice a stranger's steady. The store was out of Cabernet. Though they hadn't been touching, they sprang apart, their faces, a gallery of guilt. Daniel recovered first, his salt and pepper hair, catching the light, his laugh lines charming at 43. Nora, your home, his smile a mask. We were just planning the family reunion. Elise, 35, avoided my gaze, her caramel hair loose, her beauty effortless, a sister I'd loved through shared secrets. Bridesmaids' dresses, late-night confessions. Really, Daniel's eyes flitted as I remarked. It seemed intense for a reunion. Just settling sleeping arrangements, all the cousins, I replied, nodding, putting the bags down. I'll prepare dinner, Elise. Will you help me in the kitchen? The waves outside were a dirge. My heart was an inferno, and I realized that this was no accident, but rather a battle declared on my trust. She followed silent like a reprimanded kid, her hands shaking as she set the table. I was in the kitchen, carefully chopping vegetables, each slice a controlled rage. Nora, Elise started, her voice small. Not now, I said, my tone icy. The kids will be back soon. Mia and Liam, full of stories about swimming lessons, would flood the house with their chaos, and I had to hold this fracture together for them, for me. That night, I wore the blue dress Daniel loved, poured wine, and laughed at his jokes. Our anniversary dinner was a grotesque theater, and I watched him play the devoted husband, his hand brushing mine. His eyes warm, while Elise's discomfort was a headache I excused. Mia and Liam conversed, oblivious to the danger lurking beneath our table, while I found myself detached, a ghost, observing the woman I had once been, a 23-year-old naive woman who had paused her publishing dreams for Daniel's aspirations, trusting in his assurance. Your turn will come, Nora. We'll share this life. The lie of that promise burned a slow erasure of my fire. As I presented the anniversary cake with its candles mocking our vows, a truth crystallized. 3 weeks prior, I had discovered papers in Daniel's office that included discrepancies, offshore accounts, emails that hinted at fraud, a secret he believed to be hidden, and a power he was unaware I possessed. I smiled and cut 3 perfect slices. Make a wish, Daniel, I said, my voice honey. He blew out the candles, his eyes on me, not realizing my wish, a reckoning not of tears, but of strategy. The waves crashed louder, the pine floors gleamed, and I felt the woman I'd been shifting her dreams. Her sacrifices weren't lost. They were fuel. The affair was a wound, the fraud a betrayal. But I wouldn't crumble. I was Nora, and from this shattered tide I'd never see coming. They thought me broken, a wave-tossed shell to pity, but they didn't see the ember kindling its heat, silent but fierce. I was Nora, and I was learning the strength of my tide. A week had gone by since I'd heard Daniel's voice weave betrayal with Elise on our deck, my heart a broken stone, my anniversary, a wound that bled still, and the Cabernet bottle stood unopened on the desk, a sentinel of my resolve. Daniel slept in our bed, his breath a false peace. Elise's laughter haunted the house, her summer stay now a permanent shadow, and I was Nora. Every night when the house was quiet, I hunted covertly, my fingers following the threads of Daniel's dishonesty. My mother's voice echoed, Nora, truth is a root. Dig deep and it will hold. I started with his office files papers I had seen 3 weeks prior, their secrets now my map. His passwords remained the same, his arrogance my key. Bank statements revealed Elise's extravagance. Boutique purchases, weekend trips, and expenses beyond her freelance income. Daniel's accounts showed transfers, subtle but steady, to an offshore vault I was unaware of. The affair was a blade, but this was a deeper cut. A theft of our legacy, our children's future. I needed more, a spear sharper than grief. His laptop synced to my account for family ease was my next target. He had agreed, thinking me softened and forgiving, and didn't see the hunter in me tracking his shadows. The digital vault was a cave, and its contents were a storm. Emails between Daniel and Elise went back 3 years, not months, before Mia's struggles with asthma, and before my late-night degree. Daniel wrote, "You're my escape, Elise," with a hotel charge pinned to the date. Elise's response was, "With you, I'm whole, not like with others." My hands trembled, their words of venom seeping into my bones. They hadn't stumbled into passion, as Elise's tears suggested, while I juggled hospital bills, Daniel's dreams, and our home. Hidden files contained photos, their intimacy a wound I couldn't face, but I cataloged them, each image a coal for my fire. The worst was an email to his lawyer, dated after Mia's first hospital stay, that said, "Secure my assets. Nora's distracted. Divorce is an option." My breath stopped. He had planned to abandon me, to erase me, while I'd held his hand through her recovery. I leaned back, the shadows of the study curling like smoke, the waves' chant a pulse to my rage. Daniel hadn't just cheated. He'd built a life without me with Elise while I'd fought for us. Elise's ambition became evident, and her envy ignited a spark that destroyed our bond. She had coveted my life, my husband, my home, my strength, and taken it from me. However, the emails revealed another truth, a threat to Daniel's partner, Victor, saying, "The offshore accounts are safe, Victor. We'll divert more next year." Embezzlement, a theft from the firm my family had funded, a betrayal of Mia and Liam's inheritance. My breath steadied, the pieces locking. Daniel wasn't just a traitor to me. He was a thief and a liar, and he was tearing apart our shared empire. I printed the emails, the charges, and the photos, storing them in a locked drawer under the desk, my arsenal growing, each paper a spark for the blaze I'd ignited. I met Victor at a cafe on a cliff, the gray waves of the Atlantic reflecting my heart. Victor, 45, said, "Nora, it's been eons. Everything all right?" "I need to know something, Victor," I said softly as I sipped my coffee. Is Daniel moving money? His jaw tightened, but he listened. I slid a single, anonymous, but damning email across the table. Away from the company offshore, I suspected Nora. He's claimed my designs and hidden profits. I thought it was ambition. But this... Victor halted his allegiance to my family, outweighing his belief in Daniel, his face going pale as he gripped his mug. How long? A year, maybe 2. I hoped I was wrong, I said in a soft voice, and then I nodded. I need your help, Victor, for Mia, for Liam. Will you find proof? Silently, the wind off the sea was piercing, bearing the promise of justice. Victor's evidence would be my anchor, a blade to cut deeper than tears. He caught my eyes, a warrior seeing another, and said, Yes, Nora, for them. For you. I pretended to be the wounded wife back home, leading Daniel to believe that I was fading. He brought me tea, his eyes beseeching Nora. I love you. I'm here. His words were ash, and his fidgety hands told of his lies. I let the tears fall, real tears, for the life I'd lost, and I said, I'm trying, Daniel. It's hard. He nodded. Relief softening his face, believing that my pain was his shield. He didn't see the study lamp burning late, nor did he hear my calls to my brother, a lawyer named Caleb. I want it all. Caleb, I said with a steady voice, the house the firms share and their shame. Can you make it ironclad? With this evidence, Nora. It's already forged. The heart of it, that's yours. Caleb said in a hawk-like voice. I hung up the sound of the waves growing louder. My plan a net, and every knot a vow of vengeance. Daniel's favorite scent. Elise's lingered in the hall as her presence became more assertive. One night, I pretended to sleep and heard them whisper on the deck. I've never felt this alive. Daniel murmured, stealing our history in the process. What about the kids? My nails dug into my palms, their dismissal a spark. Mia and Liam, my heart's fire, deserved truth, not this lie. I got up silent and checked their rooms. Their sleeping faces, a promise I'd keep. The study's lamp flickered. The Cabernet gleamed, and I knew this was only the gathering of the embers. The tide was turning, and I'd wield its force. Elise asked in a thin voice, They'll adjust? And he responded, Nora's strong. She'll manage. The sea's breath swept through my main home, its waves a chant of gathering strength. I knelt in my study, the pine walls a cradle for my secrets, and my locked drawer, a nest of truths, emails, photos, and Victor's proof of Daniel's theft. 2 weeks had carved deeper wounds since I'd discovered the 3-year affair, since Daniel's fraud had bared its teeth. The Cabernet bottle stood sentinel on the desk, untouched, a vow of clarity. Daniel moved through our days like a shadow, his smiles a lie. I mirrored Elise's eyes, darted her confidence fraying. They sensed the tide shifting the air, heavy with my silence. But they couldn't see the net I wove, its threads, delicate yet unyielding, because I was Nora. Daniel avoided Elise's gaze, his fork unsteady. Elise's request over coffee, her voice too bright. Nora, could you host a dinner party? My days were a dance of deception. My laughter a mask at family dinners where my mother-in-law Clara shared stories of her youth, blind to the rot beneath her son's charm. Mia and Liam sat close, their voices bright, unaware of the storm I held at bay. I smiled, my voice as soft as seafoam, and said, Of course, Elise, it's family. June 7th, I'll make it unforgettable. Elise smiled. Your home's so warm. Clara clapped. Perfect, Nora. You're so generous despite your work. Daniel's jaw tightened, a flicker of dread. Clara rejoiced, but Mia's eyes met mine, intrigued, a ripple I'd nurtured. The pine floors hummed, the waves outside raged, and I knew that this dinner would be their reckoning. Her trust was a blindfold, and she didn't see the trap. The salty Atlantic air was stinging when I visited my sister Lena at a waterfront cafe. Her worried eyes looked into mine and said, Nora, you seem distant. Is it work? It's difficult, Lena, but I'm managing. How's Daniel with Elise? I said softly as I stirred my tea. Her face furrowed, skepticism beginning to grow. They seem close. They've always been friends, but sure, she's been peculiar. Why just a feeling about family traits Daniel's dark eyes might show in someone's child? Strange how that works. I moaned, sowing a seed. What are you saying? Noralina's hand paused, her eyes intensifying. The seed took root, its tendrils twisting, and I left her staring at the sea with a storm waking within her. The gulls wailed their wings, reflecting my intent, and I felt the net tighten. Nothing, just musing, you're a great aunt, I said, touching her wrist. His face was stern as he delivered Victor's evidence in a plain envelope to a pier where waves whispered of justice. Nora, it's worse than I feared. Daniel's been siphoning funds for years, not just from the firm, but from Clara's trust, your family's stake. He said, describing offshore accounts, forged contracts, and a betrayal of blood. He's planned to leave Nora with Elise after her new job. My heart lurched, the depth of Daniel's treachery a cliff. He thinks they'll cope. He's blind to their hearts, I said, my voice steady. Victor's eyes darkened. Thank you, Victor. This is our spear, our shield. I nodded, the heartbeat a pulse. Victor's loyalty was a current blending with mine. Together, we'd drown Daniel's lies. The pier creaked, the waves surged, and I felt the strands of the net converge. With his eyes as sharp as a loon's, my brother Caleb met me in his Portland office. He looked over my proof and remarked, "You've built a fortress, Nora. The fraud alone will sink Daniel. Divorce, criminal charges, he'll lose it all. Elise's complicity, she's exposed. What's your goal? The house, the firms share their shame? Caleb, I want them to carry this like I carry my sacrifices," I said, leaning forward and speaking in a wave. The legal path is clear. The dinner party, your plan, it's bold. Dangerous, you certain, he said, nodding with a ferocious smile. Caleb's pen tapped. We're ready. File after the party. Let them unravel first. I looked him in the eye and said, I've never been surer. They stole my dreams. I'll claim their world. The sea's song was a drum, my heart was its echo, and Caleb's words were a spark that ignited the net I had woven. The dinner would be a stage, and its final act would be their ruin. I ordered linens, navy, and gold, and every choice I made was a knot in my net. I also booked caterers, sent invitations, and had 25 guests, Clara, Lena colleagues, and clients, all of whom were witnesses to my truth. I pretended to be the faithful wife, nodding as Elise thought, Daniel's so stressed, Nora. He's not himself. And I smiled. He's busy, Elise. You know he loves you. Daniel watched from corners, his voice low, and one night he whispered, Nora, we need to talk, thinking I was asleep. He believed his plans were secure, and I held the tide a wave to crush his dreams. The study's lamp burned late, my drawer of evidence swelled, and every piece was a star in the constellation of their downfall. Nora, you and Elise are so close. Despite your work. She said, her eyes kind, and I nodded. Family binds us, Clara. I spoke my lies smoothly, and my purpose was clear. Elise is lucky to have a new job without worries. However, Daniel mentioned a health issue related to your line of work, heart troubles. Odd, right? I went to Clara's house, her kitchen warm with baking her joy a knife. Daniel and Elise thought me tamed like a broken reed. They didn't see the gull circling its beak, honed the pine walls, whispering, the cabernet gleaming, and I knew the net was almost woven its prey unaware. Clara scowled. No such thing, must be a mistake. I smiled. Likely just something Daniel said. Another seed, another ripple. The waves sang softer now, their chant a lullaby, but my heart was a forge shaping justice. I was Nora, and today my tide would crash, carving their shame into the shore. 3 weeks had built up to this moment, my net complete, its strands taut with justice. Daniel paced the hall, his eyes flickering, sensing the gale, but blind to its form. Elise's laughter would soon arrive, her trust in me. Her downfall. The dawn of June 7th rose like a war cry, its golden light slicing through the Maine mist. My coastal home was a stage, its pine walls draped in navy and gold, Elise's colors now a snare woven with my hands. The study had been my forge. Its locked drawer, a quiver of truths. Emails, photos, and Victor's evidence of Daniel's fraud. Caleb's voice echoed from our last call. File after the party, Nora. Let them break first. My smile was a spear, and my dress was a deep teal chosen to reflect the calm before a storm in the sea. I set out lobster bisque herbed focaccia and a cake with the words, "Congratulations, Elise," in elegant script. Each detail was a thread drawing 25 guests, Clara, Lena, Victor, clients, and friends into my theater. Daniel approached his voice low. "Nora, this is too much, isn't it?" The pines hummed their roots deep, and I sensed my mother's spirit. "Nora, truth is a wave. Let it rise." I tilted my head and said, "It's for Elise, Daniel. You should walk the cliffs, clear your mind." His relief was a shadow thinking he'd escape. He departed unconscious, the net held him tight. By evening, the house was a vision with caterers gliding and the air full of anticipation. Clara hugged me and said, "Nora, you're a blessing hosting, despite your burdens." I nodded and said, "Family holds us." My life was filled with salt, and my heart was filled with fire. Elise came in last, glowing in gold, her job interviews a beacon of her ambition. She hugged me and whispered, "Thank you, Nora. This means everything." I hugged her back, my voice a breeze. "You're welcome, Elise. I've made it special." The hour went by with toasts and laughter. Elise glowing as she talked about her future, oblivious to the eyes I met Lena's sharp with doubt I'd sown. I stood with a wineglass in hand, the noise in the room fading, and I said, "A toast?" in a voice as clear as the sea. And a moment I've prepared. 25 pairs of eyes turned expecting, trusting. When Elise asked for this party, I was honored. I began my tone soft. This year, balancing work and family has been a trial, but tonight's about new beginnings, Elise's journey. I raised my glass. Elise's smile faltering, sensing a change, and everyone drank their guards down, thinking the moment had passed. I pressed a remote, and the dining room screen flared to life. To celebrate, I said, I've created a tribute. A slideshow started with Elise laughing family get-togethers, joy and explicit 3-year-old emails between her and Daniel. Then it shifted with gasps erupting. Elise laughing family gatherings and joy. With a wounded voice, she screamed. The room shook Clara's hand over her mouth. Lena shaking her head, and I clicked again, fabricating bank records convincing the money for Elise's trips and her clothes wasn't hers or Daniel's. It was stolen from the firm, from Clara's trust. Elise staggered. That's a lie. But I didn't, my voice as steady as stone, saying Daniel and Elise have been lovers for years. Before Mia's hospital stays, while I fought for our family. Another slide hotel receipts, dates, and times. I asked, "How sure are you of your innocence, Elise? You've profited from theft." Her countenance betrayed her terror, confirmed her guilt, and the audience exploded whispers to yells. The net tightened, the pines sang their beat my pulse. I was the gull my wings bared, and her stillness was a confession. The investors' faces were bright when the door opened, but then they became transfixed as Daniel watched the chaos. Elise's tears, the damning slides, and asked, "What's happening, Nora? Enough," he said in a harsh voice. I grinned and said, "Perfect timing, Daniel. We're talking about your legacy." Elise sprang for the remote. I took a step back and asked, "Why, Daniel? Are you ashamed that you intend to abandon me? You plan to divorce me and hide assets while holding my hand." I clicked, exposing his lawyer's emails. "You bastard," Lena hissed, attacking Daniel as guests screamed. Clara fell into a chair. Chaos blossomed my orchestration, and I stood composed, the Cabernets gleaming in my mind like a fire I'd lit. With Victor's documents burning, I said into the storm, "There's more. Daniel's been embezzling from the firm. From our family's interest offshore accounts, years of theft." Victor rose up and asked, "Is this true?" Elise's weeping intensified as Daniel's silence turned into a confession. Nora, why I turned to her and said, "You stole, lied, and planned to throw me out privately." This "I" pointed to the room is what betrayal earns. I went to the table and lifted a folder and said, "For you, Daniel." He opened it with trembling hands and revealed divorce papers. For me, I said Caleb signed the papers this morning. The terms are clear. I will take the house and the firm's share while you and Elise will receive your shame if you're fortunate. Lena nodded her face, stone-faced. Daniel's anger was a mask, and I looked at him. No, Daniel, you did. I just raised the tide. I said. The guests ran away, some hugging me, others avoiding eye contact. Clara stopped, tears streaming. Nora, I didn't know. I squeezed her hand. Neither did I. Too long. The room fell silent, leaving Daniel, Elise, Lena, and me. Daniel's voice broke. You didn't have to do it this way. You've destroyed us. I moved closer, my voice ablade. No, Daniel, you destroyed us. I made sure the world saw. Elise sobbed in a chant. Nora, we're family. I turned grateful and hurt. Nora, I'm with you. I nodded. We'll endure, Lena. We always do. Outside, the pines ceased. Their song was finished, the Cabernet's fire burned in my chest, and I realized the truth was free. Its waves devoured their lies. But my journey, my rebirth, was just getting started. My main home was illuminated by a golden thread as the sun rose over the pines, and I stood on the deck with a mug of tea warm in my hands and steam rising like a spirit's breath. 6 months had gone by since the dinner party when I'd unleashed the tide of truth, a wave that swept Daniel and Elise's lies into the open. The Cabernet bottle was still in the study, untouched, its dark fire, a reminder of my strength. The waves had mellowed their song, now a lullaby of renewal, and my heart, which had once been a jagged reef, was now blooming with new tides rooted in pain, but flowing with freedom. Daniel and Elise's worlds had fallen apart, their shame a public scar, but I'd walked beyond their wreckage, creating a life as fierce as the sea. The aftermath of the party was like the aftermath of a storm, leaving its debris all over our lives. 3 days later, Daniel signed the divorce papers with a shaking hand, and Caleb delivered them with a sharp voice, saying, He's lost the house, the firm's share, and is standing. The fraud charges are mounting. I nodded, the papers heavy, a victory I'd forged, and Daniel's note slipped inside was a whisper of defeat. Nora, I broke us. I'm sorry, I'm leaving. I read it once, then burned it in the fireplace, its ashes drifting like my past. He fled to Boston, a junior role at a failing firm. His legacy in Victor's company erased Clara's trust, a distant memory, and I felt no triumph, just a quiet certainty. He'd sown deceit, and I'd made sure he reaped its harvest, a mercy for the woman I was becoming, not for him. A week later, Elise came to my door with a hollow expression and a diminished sense of ambition. Nora, I've signed everything. The divorce, the settlement. Can we talk? Elise's collapse was quicker, her defiance broken by the party's truth. I took the documents, my eyes as cold as the Atlantic. You stole my husband, my trust, and my family, Elise. This is justice, not a dialogue. Her tears only made a faint echo of the cousin I had loved. She left her car, fading into the mist, her wealth gone, her social circle gone. Lena and Clara turned away from her. Their doors barred her name, a whisper of shame. She moved to Portland, living with an aunt with a clerk's salary as her only shield. Her new job, the lie she had spun, never came to pass. Lena and I grew closer, our mutual betrayal a bond. One evening, she came over, her eyes brighter, and she said, Nora, you freed us. You showed me the truth. I was blind. I poured tea while the wind was gentle. It wasn't freeing Lena. It was claiming what was ours. She nodded, her voice steady. I'm teaching again. Starting fresh. Something honest, I smiled. You'll shine, Lena. You're stronger than their lies. She hugged me, a sister found in loss. Victor remained unwavering, his evidence sealing Daniel's fate. Once he called Nora, you're a force. Lena and I were rebuilding because of you. The pines swayed. Their song was an echo, and I knew we were survivors. Our tides entwined. Caleb's work was a current that shaped my future. The house was mine, redecorated to remove Daniel's shadow. New blues, driftwood accents, and my mother's woven rugs on the walls. I resumed my publishing career, taking on the executive editor role I had paused for Daniel. My mind, sharpened by Betrayal, attracted clients, my story a quiet legend. The firm grew its profits, a shield, my independence aflame. I traveled not to escape, but to heal in Taos, where I walked desert paths, the warmth of the sun reflecting my fortitude. In Edinburgh, I met writers. Their stories inspired me. In Kyoto, by a temple stream, I wrote, "Nora, you faced deceit and rose. You wove justice with thorns, not tears. You are not what was lost, but what you built." I sealed the letter a talisman, the sea's song my guide. 4 months ago, a counselor called me and said, "Nora, a young mother chose you. A girl 8 weeks old needs a home." I drove to Augusta, my heart a drum, and met her Ava, her eyes bright as the dawn. I held her warmth a miracle, my sacrifices a distant shadow. Motherhood wasn't the path I had planned, but it was mine chosen and sacred. Ava slept in her nursery, now the crib by the window where I had once wept, and I watched her tiny hands reaching and felt a peace deeper than pain. Daniel wrote once from Boston, "Nora, I miss you." I was wrong, but I didn't respond. His words were wind helpless against my tides, and Daniel didn't deserve my shore. I stood in my garden, caring for sea roses I had planted, their scent alive and sharp. A year had gone by since I had heard Daniel and Elise betray me, since their lies had broken my sky. The house was mine, its walls a canvas of my own making. The divorce had secured my wealth, and my heart had learned to trust again, not in other people, but in myself. Lena flourished her teaching light. Clara called frequently, her voice soft. "Nora, your family always." Elise's life was a shadow, her calls going unanswered. Daniel's was a whisper, his regrets meaningless. The journey had been a spiral, not a line, each turn revealing a deeper strength. I held a rose, its petals soft, and saw the truth clear as the sea. They had meant to break me to end my story, but they had been a chapter, painful but not final. My mother's voice echoed, "Nora, true strength is what no one can steal." I had lost a husband and a cousin, but I had found something unassailable, my worth forged in deceit, tempered by justice, radiant in its freedom. That evening, I raised a glass to Ava and to myself, with the sun sinking into the pines and casting gold across my garden. The worst thing that had happened had led to the woman I was most proud to be. That was my revenge, not a moment, but a life. Not a wave, but a shore. And unlike Daniel's promises or Elise's dreams, it would endure as fierce as the pines in my heart and as steady as the sea.